Welcome to Photographiliac podcast. I'm your host, B. Smitty. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for the support. Seeing the downloads has been amazing. The support over on Instagram has been awesome. If you want to follow the podcast on Instagram, go to @Photographiliac Hit that follow button. I'll give you a follow back. I appreciate the support. And I think, I don't know if I mentioned it on the last podcast. It might have been changed by then. If not, I'm just going to go over it again. I rerouted the website to have all the links available at one spot. And I'll be adding more to it as well. But if you go to Photographiliac.com, it just gives you a landing page of all the different platforms the podcast is on, as well as the merch page. So it's a better situation. Before I had multiple links and all that. So you can even find the merch link there. Even though that still has its own website, it's all in one spot. So if you go to Photographiliac.com, you can find everything there from, the merch, different podcast locations, social media account links. It's all there, good to go. Again, that's Photographiliac.com. And the Instagram, again, is @PhotographiliacPod. So let's get into this episode. So today we're going to talk about Elvis, 1956. Elvis Presley accomplished more in 1 year than many artists do in a lifetime. He released both his first album and movie. He made his first national television debut. He recorded hit songs, collaborated with some of the most talented musicians of his day, and toured relentlessly. He purchased his first home in Memphis. He also crisscrossed the country countless times, performing everywhere from baseball parks to large auditoriums. He played in small communities and in big cities. Back in 1956, this is just a few of the places that he played at: Raleigh, North Carolina, San Diego, California, Richmond, Virginia, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Austin, Texas, Sarasota, Florida, Dayton, Ohio, Atlanta, Georgia, Phoenix, Arizona, Savannah, Georgia, St. Paul, Minnesota, New Orleans, Louisiana, Denver, Colorado, Louisville, Kentucky, Miami, Florida, Houston, Texas, St. Louis, Missouri, and of course, Memphis. And it's just interesting to think, like, back then, all the touring and everything, had to be, even just like the marketing, 1956, being, so early, so young, and, just, it's interesting to think about Elvis before everyone knew about Elvis, and just kind of going around, and obviously things were happening very quickly for him at this time, but even just to think leading up to this point, just it's all about like just getting out there and the the word of mouth, and it's just crazy to think about, even right now, I'm recording this podcast, it's released out, and anyone in the world can easily click a link and listen to this podcast. It's just a whole different world now. And that list of locations that I just rifled off, the Jacksonville, Florida location, he actually collapsed from exhaustion. That was on February 23rd, 1956. Elvis's first album hit record stores on March 23rd, 1956. Again, that's another thing. When we're talking about, Elvis 1956 and album, we're talking people going out to a record store to purchase these albums. There's no downloads. You're going to go buy this at a store. It reached number 1 on the Billboard albums chart on May 5th. He had his number 1 album going for 10 weeks. Heartbreak Hotel was recorded on January 10th at Elvis' first recording session for RCA. In just 1 year, he recorded and released classic songs such as Heartbreak Hotel, as well as Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, and Blue Suede Shoes. Elvis's manager, Tom Parker, visioned Hollywood in Elvis's future. He scored Elvis a screen test in April 1956. He began filming his first movie, Love Me Tender, in August of that year. By September 25th, he received news that RCA had 918,230 orders for the still unreleased single of Love Me Tender, which was an industry first, a gold record before it was even released. The film, Love Me Tender, wrapped production on October 8th, and Elvis, his parents, and girlfriend June saw a rough cut of the film on October 24th. That same day, Variety declared Elvis, quote, a millionaire in 1 year. Love Me Tender movie premiered November 15th, followed by a nationwide release on November 21st. It came in second that weekend at the box office, just behind James Dean's final film, Giant. And in 1956, Alfred Wertheimer, a photographer, photographed the 21-year-old Elvis Presley just as he was becoming a rock and roll sensation. Wertheimer was born on November 6, 1929, in Coburg, Germany, the younger of two sons, Julius and Katie Wertheimer. The family moved to New York in 1936 to escape the Nazi persecution of Jews. Wertheimer graduated from Heron High School in 1947 and from Cooper Union School of Art in Manhattan in 1951, with a degree in advertising design. He took pictures for the Cooper Union newspaper using a camera given to him by his older brother, Henry. Wertheimer entered the Army in 1952 and was made an Army photographer. He was stationed for a time near Heidelberg, Germany. By 1954, he was out of the Army and back in New York, working as a fashion photographer for Tom Palumbo and then freelancing. In addition to Presley, he photographed Perry Como, Arthur Rubinstein, Leon Horn, Nelson Eddy, and others for the RCA label. In 1956, Wertheimer was 26 and had not been a professional photographer for long when he got a call from RCA Victor Records asking him to take publicity shots of one of its new artists, a young Southerner making his first television appearance on the Dorsey Brothers show called The Stage Show on CBS. Wertheimer recalled his introduction saying, quote, Elvis essentially grunted and didn't even look up. I thought to myself, that's okay with me. I'm a fly on the wall. He doesn't have to be sociable. Both men were quiet and introspective and seemed to get along. After photographing his performance, Wertheimer continued to shoot, following Presley back to his hotel. Wertheimer photographed Presley opening fan mail and combing his now iconic hairstyle. Wertheimer said, quote, the wonderful thing about Elvis was that he permitted closeness. Later on, I found out he also made the girls cry. Those were the two qualities that made him different from the other performers I had met. Others would let you come within 6 or 8 feet, but that was it. They'd get nervous, or they'd start to ham it up. Not Elvis. He was always just himself. Wertheimer photographed recording sessions for Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel in New York. Later, after his assignment was over, he continued photographing and went to Memphis on his own dime. Wertheimer captured an important time for rock and roll, but it was intimacy and unrestricted access to Presley and his photographs that made them special. And to me, that's a very important lesson as a photographer, is photographing, those intimate moments, the unrestricted kind of, not even just unrestricted access, but also when I think of that, how I look at that too is you're photographing moments. You're not really focused on like, hey, pose like this or hey, pose like that. You're actually just photographing what's happening within life. And I think a good example, if you're a wedding photographer, not many people remember posed photographs from a wedding. They remember a moment of a photograph. This was happening, this was photographed, this is like what I remember the most. Like standing next to a tree is not the photo that they remember. They remember the cake being smashed into the face. They remember that the kiss on the dance floor that they didn't even know was being photographed. Those are the things that will stand, that they'll remember for 50 years from now. Those moments that you can photograph. Anyways, it's interesting too. Like, this is, when Wertheimer went there, he didn't even know who Elvis was, and it's really interesting to think about that. Like, I think everyone knows who Elvis is even growing up. Like, even my kid who doesn't really listen to music right now, he's just like, he knows who Elvis is. I think it's just one of those things. But it's interesting to think back at this time, being a hired photographer, going in like, okay, it's just another artist I need to go photograph, and all right, it's a gig. Let's go shoot this. And then it just turns out being, these iconic images of an iconic figure. The photographs Wertheimer shot had become a compelling and revealing part of the vast visual record of rock and roll's first superstar. Photographed Presley shaving, sleeping on a train, recording the songs Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel. Wertheimer said, quote, "He permitted closeness. Without that, I wouldn't have gotten my intimate photographs. With Elvis, you can get within 3 feet. He acted like himself. He was the best director of his own life, and I couldn't have done better if I tried." I think with just like the, rocket success of Elvis, and just everything that became around Elvis, from, merch and all that kind of stuff even back then. The photographs that were, shot were largely forgotten after the 50s. After Presley died in 77, there was a lot more interest now in these photos. But in the 90s, they kind of made a big resurgence when Chris Murray, the owner of, I think it's called Govinda Gallery in Washington, they specialize in rock-related art. He tracked Wertheimer down and, got this work back out. Other than the photographs, Wertheimer had memories stored away as well. He recalled Presley once listening attentively as advertisers explained that he needed to stop his provocative gyrating during television performances to avoid offending parents of the teenage girls who screamed for him. Wertheimer said, quote, "When he got on stage, when he had access to that 6 minutes of glory, singing 2 songs, he ended up just doing what he wanted to do." Elvis returned to his hometown, Tupelo, Mississippi, on September 26, 1956, to perform at the Mississippi-Alabama Fair and Dairy Show. And this was for the last time. He said he used to perform there often, and he first performed there when he was 10 years old. Towards the end of 1956, on the night of December 4th, is now a stuff of legends. That evening, Elvis stopped by Sun's studio in Memphis in the middle of a Carl Perkins recording session. He ended up jamming with Carl and Sun's newest artist, Jerry Lee Lewis. Johnny Cash was there too, and thus the $1 Million Quartet was born. Wertheimer shot 2,500 photographs of Elvis in 1956, and only a small amount of those photographs were posed. Chris Murray exhibited many of the photographs, edited book collections of them, and worked with the Smithsonian on Elvis at 21, Photographs by Albert Wertheimer, a traveling exhibition that opened up at the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles in January 2010 and made more than a dozen stops, the final stop being Australia's National Portrait Gallery in Canberra. I think what you can take from Wertheimer too is to keep photographing and believe in what you're doing, and never like doubt yourself, I guess, and never really take things for granted in a way too. Just enjoy the moment and make the best of it. He ended up saying, quote, about these photos, a collection can be in your basement and nobody is interested. And right now, That's just like you can have a ton of photos in your hard drive and no one's interested, right? And then they also continue on saying, quote, and the next thing you know, somebody gets interested. So I think if you just keep on photographing what you love to do and what you're doing, and if you're feeling like no one seems interested, nothing's really going on, I'm not getting likes, I'm not doing, something, something's not clicking for you for however you're feeling, I think it's all right. You know what I mean? These photos did, he shot these in the 50s, and it was decades and decades and decades later that they became, some of the photos were used after his death in 77, but majority of these weren't even seen until the 90s. So obviously, Elvis is a, one of a kind thing to, person to end up photographing. But even on the smaller scale of things, I think, that's like a rare situation too in of itself with Elvis, and I'll get all that. I get it. But even just the times, photographing the times. Think of things that you can photograph right now, and then what's it going to be like in 40 years? I think having that mind frame is a very motivating thought to have on making new pictures. And the next year, 1957, Elvis Presley purchased Graceland. And I just want to thank you for tuning into this episode. I think this is just such a great story with photography. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where someone got called for a job, and their name will be mentioned for who knows how long. You know what I mean? Like, it's because Elvis is gonna be one of those things where it's always gonna be, it's always gonna be. It's gonna be. Elvis will be referred to now 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and these photos at the time of his age, when you think of Elvis and you think of like his crazy, rad hair, you think of this time frame Elvis. 1956 Elvis, age 21. These songs that came out at this time. It's pretty rad. You know what I mean? Just having that, like I mentioned before, you just never know what's to come about when you're out photographing. And but yeah, I want to thank you for joining in. Again, the website for the podcast is Photographiliac.com. You can find all the links. There's new merch. There's hoodies, shirts. There's a lot of stuff going on with the merch. I appreciate the support over there as well. Hit me up on Instagram. I'm following back everyone who follows me. So if you follow the podcast at Photographiliac Pod, I'll follow you right back. And I appreciate the support over there. Oh yeah, that's where I post photos of like teaser photos, basically, the upcoming podcast. And then as I'm in the process of doing a new episode, I'll continue to post photos on that topic. And I like doing Instagram stories as well, so you can kind of keep updated as well. I have a Discord for the podcast as well. Hit me up on Instagram if you want to be a part of the Discord. Just send me a DM, and I'll send you an exclusive link. You can get in there. And I usually just throw some random stuff in there as well with the podcast, like pictures and stuff. But if you want to join in, submit your own pictures of like Elvis or whatever you want, whatever, any photography that you're up to, I'd love to see it. Talk about photography, the podcast, whatever you want to do. And again, that's at Photographiliac Pod. I'll say it again since I stuttered. At Photographiliac Pod on Instagram. Again, all the links at Photographiliac.com. And appreciate the support. And that was Elvis, 1956.